Would you be willing to put yourself in danger to expose a lie? Nellie Bly did when she went into the insane asylum on Blackwell's Island and endured many horrible conditions during her 10-day stay. She also made a trip around the world in 72 days, which nobody had ever done before. She married a man who was 40 years her senior. This man was Robert Seaman, and he was thought to be exceptionally wealthy. She even patented the 55-gallon oil barrel after inheriting her husband's company. After bad planning for her travels, she landed in Austria 2 days before World War I and became one of the only American women to report on the Eastern Front of the war. A journalist of talent and spunk, a woman of strength and courage, and a person of determination, Nellie Bly pioneered the road for female and investigative journalism while living through triumph and tragedy alike. Elizabeth Jane Cochran, later known as the famous Nellie Bly, was born in Cochran's Mills, Pennsylvania, on May 5, 1864. Located just outside of Pittsburgh, the town was named after her father, a mill owner and a county judge, Michael Cochran. Nellie grew up in a family of 15 siblings, with her mother being Mary Jane Cochran. Young Nellie was given the nickname Pink due to the standout outfit her mother chose for her. Being only 6, Elizabeth's father had perished and everything changed. Elizabeth's mother remarried to John Jackson Ford, a local policeman and a drunk, 2.5 years after her husband's death. He was an abusive man who hurt Nellie's mother. The treatment got so bad that Nellie's mother decided to divorce her husband, which was not only uncommon, but risky for a woman to do at the time. During that, Nellie continued her education after primary school in the Indiana Normal School for Women. She ran out of finances right before the end of the first term of her schooling and had to leave. She then moved in with her mother in the nearby city of Pittsburgh. After reading an article demeaning women's position in the workforce from the Pittsburgh Dispatch newspaper, Nellie wrote a passion-filled rebuttal that caught the attention of the paper. The author of the upsetting article was Erasmus Wilson, who went by the pen name of QO, which stood for the Quiet Observer. Although poorly written, Nellie's letter was seen to show potential, and she was hired to report for the Dispatch. Nellie, as a female journalist, was restricted to writing about women's topics, things such as child-rearing and gardening. Nellie was tired of reporting on frivolous things. As such, she traveled to Mexico for half a year, where she would report on the Mexican daily life and living conditions for the Dispatch. She did this to show her editors that she was capable of reporting on serious social topics.
You can't just raise your hand and say you're a journalist and you are protected by the First Amendment to ask questions and tell stories. So there's lots of reasons why Mexico is an incredibly dangerous place to be a journalist. So there's lots of reasons why you need to go undercover to tell stories.
Nellie left the Dispatch soon after, on March 20th, 1887. Erasmus Wilson, her senior, remembered the 20th clearly. He recalls, "No one knew where she was until a note was discovered. It read, 'Dear QO, I am off for New York. Look out for me. Bly.'"
Nellie Bly was given the opportunity to enter a madhouse and pretend to be insane by Colonel John Cockrell. She was able to convince many people she was insane because she practiced in front of a mirror many times. To get in front of a judge that would send her to Blackwell's Island, she acted oddly in front of the women at the boarding house she went to in New York. By the first night, she had convinced many of the women she was insane, and one girl even had a dream of Nellie killing her. She didn't sleep the whole first night to make her look even more insane, and sat on the end of the bed the whole night to give her the image of being crazy. She later said it was the greatest night of her existence. The next day, she kept asking for her trunks and asking if anybody had seen them. Eventually, they took her to the authorities, and she was put in front of Judge Patrick Duffy. She was taken to the insane asylum after being pronounced insane by Dr. William C. Brasted. She arrived and had a terrible time. The food was awful and almost impossible to eat. They were given terrible tasting bread with even worse butter to go along, unsweetened tea, and a few prunes. She didn't have proper bedding and could not sleep well due to the people walking around the whole time. She would have to have a freezing cold bath every week, and then had to be dried by a towel that had just dried everybody else. Then her hair was brushed very viciously with the same brush that had just brushed every other member.
The work that I do is so based on telling the truth that I would have a hard time faking insanity, that I can't even grasp how she did that, but I understand why. and how important that work was.
Before Nellie took her trip into the madhouse on Blackwell's Island, the conditions were terrible. The nurses clearly didn't care about the patient's feelings or thoughts, as every time a patient complained about mistreatment, they were punished. The food was so bad that people would get sick from eating it, and any foodborne illness could kill them due to lack of treatment for the patients. After Nellie came out about how terrible the asylum was, all of the apathetic nurses were fired and replaced with people who cared. There was a barrel of salt placed in front of the dining hall for all patients to use, and better food was provided. The patients didn't have to take cold baths anymore and were given different towels to dry with. Proper bedding was also provided for a more comfortable experience for the insane. In addition, New York City provided an additional $1 million to their mental health budget. Another thing that happened after Nellie was a huge wave of women went undercover in reporting. Women reporting also became even bigger, and many more women were hired for reporting jobs. Women would go undercover for anything newspaper companies could imagine.
Might be looking at animal abuse in factory farms. She would be looking at some of the big, outstanding issues that places where we don't have access.
All of this was made possible because of one lady who was brave enough to go into a place she had never been before and tried something crazy for the sake of others.
And risky thing for her to do as an investigative journalist. However, I feel that the long-term benefits for mental health patients due to the institutional reforms and the new protective regulations that came out of that were really worthwhile in the long run.
One night, an idea struck Nellie to embark on a journey around the world, and not just in any fashion, in record-breaking fashion. Bly wanted to beat the fictional Phileas Fogg's record of traveling the world in 80 days. His story was published by Jules Verne and became immensely popular. When Bly proposed this idea to her editor at the New York World, she was denied because he believed only a man would be able to make the trip unchaperoned. She told him that if he sent a man, then she would take the journey for another paper and beat him. Taking a hint, Bly's editor sent her. So Bly set off for London after packing exceptionally light from Jersey City, New Jersey. Upon arrival in the British metropolis, she took a small detour to Amiens, France to meet Jules Verne, as he was the creator of the man who Nellie was trying to beat. He encouraged her and hoped she would triumph. From there she traveled to Italy, Egypt, Yemen, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Singapore, and then to Hong Kong. Upon arrival in Hong Kong, Nellie learned that she had a rival named Elizabeth Bisland, who had been sent out on the same day as her by the Cosmopolitan magazine. Surprised but not deterred, Nellie decided to push on to Japan, where she boarded a ship to San Francisco on the 20th of December. Taking a personal train car upon arrival in the United States, Nellie proceeded to traverse across America until she arrived back in Jersey City, beating Phileas by 8 whole days at a record-breaking 72 days. She became an international celebrity and beat Bisland by 4 days in the process. Bly met and married wealthy industrialist Robert Seaman in the late 1890s. After her loveless marriage ended with his death in 1904, she took the reins on his company, Ironclad Manufacturing. After succumbing to debt and suits, Bly left the company to return to reporting. After critiquing the women's suffrage movement and reporting on the front lines of the First World War, Bly died in 1922 from pneumonia, abandoned by all but Arthur Brisbane, a close friend of hers. Bly was buried in an unmarked grave, somewhat forgotten for decades. Bly had much success and fame in her early years as a bold, intriguing journalist, and then lost her appeal as the years went on. Nellie's life was enveloped in both triumphs and tragedies. Tragedies such as her sorrow-filled childhood, the gender boundaries which impeded her success, and being left by the ones she loved because they were too infatuated with their own greed to care about Nellie. Yet through this, she triumphed a number of times through her madhouse expose that allowed the mistreated patients to get the care they needed, her record-breaking trip around the world, and her ability to inspire others. Nellie Bly crafted a name for herself, and even though she perished tragically, her triumphs cannot be forgotten. And it all comes down to beg the question once again, would you be willing to put yourself in danger to expose a lie?